there's all sorts of things to learn about interest rates, about what the market is currently doing. Is it a good time to buy? Is it a bad time to buy? We hear that all the time. Should I buy? Should I wait? But before we get into any of that, I would like to know from you, what does a Corvette, a single wide trailer, and 3.5% interest rate, what do those three have to do with each other?
Well, Peter, those three things happen to be three little topics that I talked about with David Zopf today.
Okay.
On today's episode. He is a lender here in the Nashville area. He's been serving Nashville for about 15 years. Great guy, loves driving Corvettes. He just picked up an investment property that is a single wide over on the lake. So I was super stoked about that.
Okay.
And we talked about kind of the nature or the status of the market right now, what things are up to, interest rates, where they've been, where they're at, where they're going. And he was super informative about the pathway to homeownership. And he actually provided, sort of the 3 steps you need to take before reaching out to a lender and how to get your stuff together to make sure that, the process is smooth. So it was great.
3 steps before reaching out to a lender. Because I've always thought, well, the first thing you gotta do is find out what you qualify for. Mm-hmm. But you're saying there's 3 things to do before you even reach out to this lender.
Yeah, so he provided some advice that was, I thought, super helpful. Obviously, if you wanted to talk to him right away, you could. His email is going to be right in the description below. But he provided 3 kind of points that you want to focus on before you reach out to somebody, just so you know kind of where you're at and the information that he's going to need from you to see what you qualify for. So super helpful resource. Anybody who's looking maybe on the fence about homeownership and wants to dive in, this would be a great resource to start with. And he's just a great speaker. He had me captivated. You'll see me halfway through the conversation just kind of staring because he's a great storyteller. I loved it.
Okay, well, I can't wait to hear it. Let's check it out.
Awesome. All right, Real Real 615, all things Nashville real estate. I'm here with David Zopf from Guaranteed Rate, lender extraordinaire. How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good, man. Let's blow it up. It's good to see you.
You too.
I hear you got a single wide.
Yeah. So, we're in 2023. The market kind of sucks. And even though in Nashville it's good, it has been better. So in 2020, life was great. 2021, it was really good. And then it started mellowing out a little last year. But I was at a friend's house down on a lake, and I'm like, you know what? I haven't missed my opportunity to buy a lake house. I've still got grandkids coming. My kids, they're still in college. One doesn't even have a boyfriend. So I'm not too worried about this now, but in the future, I should buy a lake house.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I start looking, I'm like, man, this crap is expensive. And I told somebody, I said, I'm only looking to spend X. She goes, you'll never find it. And then last 4th of July, we're down there and we see this property, like, man, online, this thing looks great. And so we get there and it was a single wide. But it was a single wide from 1972.
Okay.
And they had taken and they kind of built around it.
Nice.
And so, but it was right in our price range, and a lady bought it for $1,500. The land. Okay. The land is just I bought the land.
Yeah.
Right. But the land was great, and so she bought the land for $1,500 in '72. Put this single wide on there, and then in '79 built the structure over it.
Nice.
And sold it 3 years ago to a cabinet maker.
Okay.
Who gutted it and made it cool.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So we're pretty excited. So
you got a lake house.
So now I got a lake house. It's a single wide, but you don't know this, but so in '97 is when I got married, and we bought one of the best investments I've ever made, which was a double wide. Again, on a lake. I lived in Atlanta. This was up on Lake Hartwell, and in the Olympics are just about to be there. This is in '96. I said, you know what? I should buy some land. And then it took till '97, and I found it, and we bought it for $86,000.
Nice.
Brand new single wide, and we sold it 10 years later for $290,000.
Ooh, nice.
And we got to use it for 10 years.
Yeah.
Real estate is awesome.
Real estate is awesome.
I mean, you can really, it's fun to have, I guess, Bitcoin or gold or VU, the S&P, but you don't get to play with it.
Yeah.
There's
you
not
can't
a whole
take your
lot.
jet ski to Bitcoin paradise and roll around the lake. It's not the same thing.
And your wife doesn't really get excited. Your spouse doesn't get excited about you showing them the bank statement.
It's the opposite. My wife gets so annoyed when I talk about Bitcoin. And I don't even know anything about Bitcoin, and she knows that, which is why the conversation is just awful.
There you go. But anyways, I say this just to say that single wide, double wide, it doesn't really matter. If you find something that people will want in the future, it's a good investment.
Absolutely.
You know, it could be worn out, run down, or it could be nice, but if it's a deal and it's on the land's going to appreciate.
That's awesome.
So.
And how long have you, so you said you were in Atlanta before this, how long have you been lending in Nashville?
So I started in 2003. I had my own business, and a mortgage company was one of my clients. And so my second daughter was on the way, who is now 19, and she said, and I said, I need to get a real job. You know, back then, being self-employed, you just didn't go out and get insurance. So anyways, one of my clients was a mortgage company. I got a job there in 2003, and then in 2007, the market, they're like, hey, we're really heavy here in Florida. Mm-hmm. We need to start balancing up in Tennessee.
Okay.
So we moved here in February, opened up the office in April, and then the company went under in 2007.
Nice.
Or in August. August
Okay.
2007.
So 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. 2007, 2008 was terrible. But anyways, so that's how long I've been here, 16 years.
Awesome.
And,
that's cool.
I'm still a loan officer.
Yeah, good. Well, kind of the main goal for our conversation today is I want to try to help people who are maybe looking at kind of diving into the pathway of homeownership. Maybe they haven't pulled the trigger to the first property. They're looking to kind of, maybe they're stuck with an obstacle of how to get into the lending process. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, you know, what's the first step someone should take if they want to purchase a home? Say they're sitting at home watching this right now.
Yeah.
They want to dive in.
Okay. So on the side, I teach personal finance at Columbia State, and I love doing it because I do have a lot of content from my real world that they find entertaining. But I think one of the biggest things, and there was a stint in there when everything crashed. I worked for Dave Ramsey for about a year. So I went from getting people into debt to getting them out of debt, and now I'm back in. And that was a short stint, but it was a lily pad and it was fine. I didn't regret working for Dave. I think Dave is great. I think his program is great. The 7 baby steps and so forth. However, that's not what I teach in my class. And I'm writing a book about it, and I'm not going to. There are certain things he's really good at, which is getting people out of debt. Mm. But if you want to buy a house, some of the things he says may or may not be the best thing to do. So, first of all, what gets you a ticket into the ballpark is a credit score. When people come to me and they've got a really bad credit score, they're done. We've got to figure out how to fix it. Now, if your credit score is low because you got maxed out credit cards, that's a simple fix. You just have to pay down your credit cards. It's not necessarily easy, but it's simple. If you've got collections or a bankruptcy or foreclosure, that takes a lot of time. But if your credit score is low just because of the balance, the next month, after you pay down that balance, your credit score goes up. Okay. So that's number one. Once we have a credit score we can work with, the next piece is what we call, as a lender, your debt to your income, your DTI, debt to income ratio. So let's say you make $6,000 a month, so $72 a year. $6,000 a month, you can essentially spend about $3,000 a month on expenses. Those expenses would include your house, your student loans, your credit cards, your car payment, your potential alimony or child support, things like that. Everything we have to take into account.
Okay.
So that's number 2. If somebody does go to 50%, they're essentially going to be what we would call house rich and cash poor. It doesn't leave a lot there for vacations and fancy fingernails and stuff like that, which is what a lot of people like to spend money on. But anyways, once we have that, then we look at the down payment. And people can get into a deal with no money down in the same way that they can go to the BP station and buy Pringles chips. If they were to go to Aldi, it'd be a lot less expensive. If they've got a down payment, it's way less expensive to buy a house. So you can buy a house with little or no money down, but it's a very expensive way of doing it. Just like grocery shopping at crazy places versus going to an Aldi where it's very affordable. If you've got 3 to 5%, that's a big deal. you can really get a good scenario going with 3 to 5% down. Now, when I bought my first house back in '95, I got a little gift from my grandmother. Tons of people do it. It works all the time. And I paid her back, but she signed a little letter, literally back then, hand wrote it, that said he doesn't have to pay this back. And so getting a gift to buy a primary is a way to get over a hump. And there are a lot of families that have gifts to give. If they don't, they can do what's called, like I mentioned, the expensive way. They can do a down payment assistance program, a DPAP, where the company will kind of disguise a gift as it's in the form of a second mortgage. So here in Tennessee, we have what's called the THDA, but there's also the Chinoa Fund and things like that. And basically, they'll give you a mortgage for a second mortgage, but you get to use that money as your down payment. So that's a way to get in. So step one would be to have your credit score good. I'm going to kind of go off a little bit. If you don't have a credit score, there's a very simplistic way of getting one that's very safe. Dave Ramsey says never get a credit card because it is basically like crack, and you don't know if you're going to get addicted to crack when you try it, or cocaine,
Yeah.
It's easy to get addicted to a lot of things in life. We won't go down that road, but there's a lot of things that people are addicted to. They say, I wish I would have never tried this.
Yeah.
And credit is one of those ways where you get a $300 or $500, $1,000 credit card, and you say, oh, I'll just pay that off when at the end of the month, and all of a sudden you don't, and the balance grows, and you're on a 30% interest rate to pay that thing off, and you can't get out. Well, there's an easy way, and the fastest way if you get zero credit to get a good credit score within 6 to 12 months is you get what's called a secured card, or actually two of them. And it's essentially like having a bank account where every month that bank reports back to the credit reporting agencies that you have kept that bank account full, and therefore you're going to get your credit. The way it works is you give a secured card company, and if you do, there's a lot of ways. Just look up secured card. Nerd Wallet is a good place to go, but you give them $500, and then you can ideally you just use less than $50 every month. So once a month on one card, you put gas in your car. Once a month on the other card, you buy groceries, because you have to buy groceries and most of us have to buy gas. Something that you can do every month. Or maybe you say, hey, I've got a Spotify account, or I have a Netflix account. Instead of paying that directly out of my checking account, it goes over here to the credit card, and then the credit card gets paid by my checking account every month. Totally automated. So you got money in this account, and every month they say, holy crap, he's paid it off every single month. It builds credit very quickly. So that's a safe way of building credit.
So you recommend a secured card? That's baby step number one, not to use Dave Ramsey.
Yeah, right.
Step number one.
That's a great way.
Yeah.
Because what if you are addicted to it? What if you can't control yourself? And you're going out and you're buying booze, and you're going on vacations, and you're doing stuff, and you're like, wow, I didn't think this would be a problem. Look, you max out at 500, you just close the account. You don't get dinged for it.
Oh, because they just take your
Because they just keep your money.
Yeah.
Yeah, you paid for it in advance. And your goal is to prove that you can not use very much of that. Whereas on a regular credit card, you go in, that $500, you can't pay it back. Now you've got a collection on your account. Crushes you.
So
this way you've built up some credit ideally. If you make your payment on time, you're not hurt because you made your payment. Then you just say, close the account, keep my money.
That's
You're off
great.
to the races.
Yeah, I remember in my early 20s, I had an issue. I was financially irresponsible with something, as we all are, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I remember having to get a secured card for $300 or something, and they just now, this was, I think it was probably 15 years ago, and I had the account open since then. I haven't used it in forever. And I just finally got an email the other day that said we're sending you back your $300 because the account hasn't been used.
Nice.
That's a sweet little bonus. So that's the other side of it. You get a little bonus a couple years later. It's great.
Yeah.
All right, so let's say I've got my credit score is looking good. I've got my DTI looking good. I've got my down payment ready. So now what's the next step for somebody looking to kind of dive into homeownership?
All right. So once you have those, or you believe you have those, you can reinforce that and you get what's called a pre-qualification letter.
Okay, and what's that?
A pre-qual is that you actually talk to somebody like me where they're actually going to confirm that you've got a good credit score and that, hey, your ratios are in line and this is what the credit score would be. And in an ideal world, they're going to kind of give you an idea. Look, the other day I had a human, reach out to me and say, hey, it was a referral from I know her dad. And she's like, I said, have you looked into cost of a house that you think would fit? She's like, yeah, I really like the $600,000 houses. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, she was working at a grocery store. And so her debt to income ratio was 200%. I can go up to maybe 50.
Okay.
There was no way she was going to qualify. But she didn't know, and I wasn't offended that she came to me, because that's my goal, is to help her figure out, do you qualify for that?
Sure.
In reality, she qualified for about $150,000, $200,000.
But that's good information. Somebody can come to you with kind of the basis of what they have, and then you can kind of let them know, here's where you should be looking.
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of people get caught up. They don't know what they should be looking for. A lot of these numbers, especially if you've never owned real estate before, you hear even $150,000. You hear that, you're like, I can never have that much money. If you're making whatever you're making, it just sounds like way more. You don't understand what the payments are, and a lot of that, I think you can overcome a lot of that by starting the conversation with someone like you.
Yeah.
Actually finding out what the numbers are first.
Exactly. And I had another gentleman about a month ago who did the same thing. He says, oh, I want a payment closer to X. But you never know unless you try.
Sure.
There's a lot of calculators out there. If you ever want to know, you can go to dznumbers.com. It's real simple. It'll actually tell you what your payment would be, but also it tells you how much money you have to bring to the table.
Oh, that's cool. So dznumbers.com.
Yeah, my name is David Zopf, David Zebra, DZ Numbers, Numbers. Simple. You're not going to be hammered like you would if you went to Lending Tree. Nobody knows. It's inconspicuous.
Sure. So they just go there, they kind of put in the basic information of what they're looking at and lets them know what they need for down payment, what they need to bring to the table, or?
Yeah, because a lot of people think that the down payment is all they need. But in reality, there are some closing costs. So there's closing costs, prepaids, escrows, down payment. I mean, on your side, there'd be the inspection.
Sure.
So there's fees, there's costs. Some of them are just money set aside up front to pay your insurance in the future and your taxes, but some are legitimate costs.
Sure.
So
dznumbers.com.
Yeah, and it'll give them an ability to say, oh, wow, there's more to this. I thought I was almost there.
Yeah.
But I just have a little farther to go to save. And
that's helpful because I think that takes a lot of the intimidation. Also, I know as a realtor, like a lot of times people don't want to start having conversations because they don't know what they can qualify for, and they feel like they're being a burden sometimes. When in reality, it's as easy as just, hey, give us a few numbers, let's look at it, and then here's your budget. If you're not happy with the budget, then here's 3 or 4 steps that you can go through to get yourself to the budget that you want to be at.
Right.
I think that for whatever reason, people have this kind of this looming cloud over them where they feel like, oh, I don't want to bother David, or I don't want to bother a realtor with if I can't qualify. And it's like, if you don't qualify, who cares? It's not gonna laugh at you. It's like I've applied for so many things I haven't qualified before. It's just reality, and that's how you learn the information and get the proper tools and steps.
Yeah.
Shift the conversation a little bit. I'd love to know your thoughts on the current market right now in Nashville, and whether you think right now we're in May of 2023, end of May. If you think it's a good time to buy, or what are your thoughts? Do you think people should wait for rates, or do you think they should just kind of dive in, or how do you feel?
I think that the Nashville market is one of the strongest markets in the United States. So what goes on in Nashville might be different than what would go on, let's say, in Las Vegas or Detroit or Memphis. Memphis is only 3 hours away, but the market there will probably be different. A lot of people from California to Chicago to New York, a lot of their companies are moving here. So there's a lot of people coming to town with their current company, or just saying, hey, there's a lot of stuff moving and shaking in Nashville. I mean, Austin's a great city as well, But there's people moving from other places to other cities, and Nashville's one of them, and one of the best, I believe. So, do I think that real estate is going to take a hit in Nashville? I don't.
Nice.
Due to the fact that there's trains already coming, and it takes a lot of energy to get those things going and stop them. And I don't think that the current interest rate environment is going to do that.
Okay. So even if it gets a little worse, you're saying you don't think it's going to hit Nashville as hard as maybe some other places?
Home values, I don't believe, are going to go down. I think they're only going to go up. So if you see an opportunity to think that you can just wait and it's going to get a better, lower payment or a lower cost, I don't see that that's going to happen.
Sure. So even if the rates do go down, you're going to pay more for the house anyway?
Yeah, I mean, if the house goes up in value a year from now and you waited, or the variety of houses in the neck of the woods you wanted, those houses are only going to appreciate.
Sure.
I think. Are there potentials to find good deals? I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
But in general, I don't think the housing market's going to get hammered here.
So if somebody, you mentioned that you teach some financial literacy courses and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody's looking to get into real estate investing, what do you recommend for their first purchase? Do you recommend a primary? Do you recommend a rental? What are your thoughts on duplexes? I know a lot of people have I've seen 800 million different ways of, pathways to success on YouTube and stuff. So what are your thoughts on what someone's first purchase should be? Should it be primary?
I believe your first purchase should be a primary. I was sitting in my office the other day, and I don't get a lot of walk-ins, and these two boys walked in, and they're probably, one of them works at Costco and the other in the pizza department. The other one is a valet.
Okay.
But they want to get into investing.
They just walked in?
They just walked in.
I haven't heard that happening in ever.
It's very refreshing.
Wow.
It's very refreshing. However, they had no idea.
Sure.
And so if somebody wants to start off with an investment property, you have to have at least 15% down.
Okay.
Versus 3 to 5.
Sure.
So you also have to have, on an investment property, you have to have money saved up called reserves. So generally it's 3 to 6 to 12 months of reserves, meaning if the payment's $2,000, you have to have at least $6,000 left over after you close.
Okay.
So you got to come up with a bigger down payment, plus have money set aside for an investment property.
And that's just in case you can't get a tenant or it doesn't work out.
Exactly. Because on an investment property, people are crazy. I had an investment property once, and the dude threw his mom out the window.
Wow.
And it split
Physically
up.
out the window?
Physically, yeah. It was bad.
What?
So
Okay.
they had to go, and then, long story short, it was crazy. People are crazy.
Yeah.
5% of people,
Yeah.
I think, are crazy.
But enough that they make for the best stories though, so.
They do make
Wait, so this was one of your
bad
tenants
decisions.
that this happened with?
Yeah, so if you ever end up being a landlord, you'll find that things kind of evolve. So I had this nice young man and woman move in, and then mother moves in, and then brother moves in, and father-in-law moves in, who I originally rented to. Very nice young man and his wife move out. So now I've inherited mother, father-in-law, and crackhead brother,
Oof.
who did nothing but play basketball.
Okay.
And probably sell drugs, I don't know, but anyways,
Sure.
mom went in there, and it was just a crazy story, but things happen, and so there's a vacancy factor.
Yeah.
Where there will be time where people will be out. My last time selling that, I get in there, and the different tenant had, if you're if you're ever an investor, you have to go into your house every 6 months, I believe.
Okay.
Every 6 months, you have to go in and take a look at it. That's going to make sure that they fix anything that they break. And you're going to notice, oh my gosh, the gutter has fallen off.
Sure.
Oh my gosh, they're not taking care of the leaves. In this scenario, they didn't take care of the leaves for 2 years. And in Atlanta, there's a ton of trees.
Yeah.
Roots grew through the decomposing leaves into the house.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, it was a lot of damage.
That's insane.
It is insane.
Like through the floor of the house?
Through the wall.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so the reason I found this out is it's expensive to maintain a rental property, believe it or not. There's the sewer line from the house to the street, the roots, there's a million trees in Atlanta, grew through some of the sewer. So this is a pretty common problem, especially in older neighborhoods.
Okay.
But anyways, it was like $8,000 to fix this thing. And then all of a sudden the hot water heater goes out. There's $2,000.
Yeah.
Because I live, 4 hours away essentially. I can't just shoot down and fix these things. You got to pay for somebody. So there's 10 grand gone. Well, that's not 3 months of
It's like 6 months of reserve.
Yeah. So it's expensive. So on an investment or a second home, you've got to have money set aside for issues so that you're not just going to not be able to make your payment. On a primary home, you don't need reserves.
Okay.
You can have a much smaller down payment and your interest rate will be considerably lower.
Sure.
So whereas today the interest rate, let's say, is 6.5, it'd be 7.5, 8 for an investment property.
Gotcha.
It's always going to be more.
Way more down and way more. And then you mentioned earlier something about kind of some no money down programs that were super expensive.
Well, they're just more expensive yet.
What does that look like?
For instance, there's a potential for the interest rate to be a little higher. They typically follow the FHA guidelines.
Okay.
FHA, so quick history, we've got Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, pretty popular names. Mm-hmm. And then we have FHA, we have VA, we have USDA. And so FHA, the VA is for veterans, USDA is typically rural,
right.
And then 100% financing, 100% financing. And then FHA generally is 3.5% down.
Right.
Well, FHA is great if you got, let's say, instead of a 740 or 760 credit score, you got a 630. Mm. The rate does not get hammered.
Okay.
The rate's going to be the same typically on an FHA, no matter what your credit score is.
Okay.
Whereas on a conventional Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the lower your credit score, the higher your interest rate, the higher your mortgage insurance. So mortgage insurance, you got to pay for a policy that covers the lender. Right. If you don't put 20% down. You can buy a house without 20% down, but you're just going to have to pay an insurance policy for somebody else.
Sure.
Anyways, so they're typically based on FHA loans, and it's a second mortgage.
Okay.
Based on, let's say, a 15% payoff period.
Okay.
And so you've got your mortgage, and then you've got a second mortgage that takes principal and interest on an amortization schedule of 15 years.
Okay.
So you're not going to be just basically skidding in and squeaking through that debt-to-income ratio. You're going to have a good bit more income to afford that.
Gotcha. So that's not really a great option, but it is something that people can look into if they
need to get in that for. If somebody wants to get a first home and they say there's no way I'll ever get the down payment, it's not a bad option. It's just a little bit more expensive option. If somebody says there's no way I'm going to get all the way over to that really, inexpensive store, I'm just going to go to the gas station. It's okay to pay a little extra right now.
Sure.
They're still going to get into the house that's going to appreciate. They can still make a good bit of money. You cannot use THDA nor the general fund for an investment property or second home. It's only first-time home buyers.
Actual first purchases. So even if it's not just primary, but actual first purchase. Gotcha. Okay, and that's something through Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah, just look up THDA and you can see it. So, no, you brought up, is it good to come out of the gate with a duplex? Mm-hmm. Duplexes are pretty sweet because you can buy a duplex, or a triplex or a quadruplex, but generally I don't see a lot of them, but they're out there, and you can buy an investment property like you're buying a primary.
Okay.
Because you're going to live on one side and rent the other side out. So there's your investment. Ideally, that will pay for the entire mortgage.
And can you count the rental income as part of your debt to income?
So that's a great question. You've kind of stumped me. I haven't. Generally, they don't, but sometimes I think you might be able to.
Okay.
And the way that works is on any investment property, you can count future income without having a lease.
Okay.
Because on the appraisal, the appraiser will say, look, this property would rent for $2,000. Mm-hmm. And so you get to take 75% of that. So $1,500 you get to use as income.
Wow, okay.
So you're really only financing 25%.
Okay.
And on a duplex, being a primary, I don't think you can do that, but you might. I'd have to do some research. We can put down there in the notes.
Even if not at first, maybe when you go to refinance, you could do something like that.
Absolutely.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, but if you can find a good, I was born in a duplex. Literally, my parents had a duplex when I was born, and they're great. It's just they're kind of hard to find.
I see a lot of you just scroll through Instagram and Facebook and stuff, and you see all these financial gurus, and they're always like, just find a quadplex for $300,000 and rent all. And it's like, yeah, it's a great plan, but do you see how many quadplexes do you even see? First of all,
right?
And if you see one, I assume there's probably a lot of investors waiting in line to get in and get those. But it sounds like a sweet deal, so it's good to know.
Yeah, it is a good deal. Good way to go.
So let's talk real quick, just interest rates. Where are we now? Where do we come from? Where do you think we're going? What's the scoop?
Okay, it's an interesting one. It's a big one. When I bought my first house, I got a 5-year ARM, and this is in 1995, and I was in the 7s. Everybody told me, hey, those are pretty good rates. We used to be in the teens. Well, a couple years later, I refinanced into the 6s, and I thought I was the man. I was in the 6s. It was such a big deal. And now that's about where we are in the 6s. However, what has happened we were down in the 2s and 3s in 2020. So there was this huge refi boom because most people were in the 4s and 5s, 3s, 4s, and 5s. But we were at a lower dramatically. What happened was the government said, whoa, COVID is really bad. We need to stimulate the economy. What can we do? So yes, the government does affect interest rates. Not the way we hear on the news. On the news, they said the Fed's increased rates. Mm-hmm. That's the prime rate. That is our credit cards and our cars. The mortgages are not part of that.
Okay.
The way they affect mortgage rates is, let's say my company puts out $1 billion worth of mortgages in what's called a mortgage-backed security. It's a security that people can buy into, just like buying a stock. And these mortgage-backed securities are typically bought by normal people or investors. The government got in and started buying them.
Okay.
And so they bought them and made them very lucrative, and therefore, because of that, the interest rates went down due to the costs of mortgage-backed securities. Well, they did that for a long time, and it just they took them so far down. And then inflation starts showing up because people are getting all this money from the government in the form of PPP loans or just help from the government. So they're spending all this money that they didn't have before. So inflation starts going up. Well, then they're like, holy cow, we've got to do something. So we're going to start increasing the rates. Mm. So they went from instantly buying mortgage-backed securities to not just tapering them they went from buying them, not tapering, but selling them. Mm. And that crushed the mortgage-backed security market. So interest rates went up. Interest rates always go up in the same direction as inflation. Okay. Because inflation went up, interest rates went up. Because the Fed has been doing all these things to lower interest or inflation, which is working, we've pretty much peaked. I mean, they were increasing dramatically and then smaller, and now they haven't increased, and we're hoping they will stop. Okay. And then the inflation will go down and rates will follow. We all thought we would be in the 5s right now. Okay. But we're in the high 6s. It's crazy. It's crazy.
But you're thinking as the Fed does more to combat inflation, which hopefully they do, you're thinking we're going to keep going down, or you think we're kind of staying steady here? Or?
No, I think that the rates are going to go down. Okay. And one of the problems that we're having with our economy when it comes to selling houses, there's not a whole lot of people who want to get out of their 3% interest rates. All these people that I got into 3% interest rates, 2% interest rates, like these are awesome. I don't want to go into a 6.5% interest rate to buy another house. So I'm going to hang out until rates come back down. And so that's them. They have a house. Mm-hmm. But let's say you got a first-time home buyer that doesn't have a house. It's okay to get a 6.5%.
Yeah, I've heard a great sentence from one of my lender friends who said, "Date the rate, marry the house." Right. Right. That's what you guys say.
Yeah, that's the saying is date the rate, meaning look, if you like the house, get it. In a couple of years, we'll be back in ideally the 4s. Sure. I don't think we'll ever see 2s and 3s again. That was dumb. But we'll get in the 4s and we'll just refinance it from the 6s down to the 4s. I did really well in the refi boom because I have a spreadsheet that breaks it down. Look, this is exactly how much it will cost. this is what your old rate is, and this is where your break even is in the short term and in the long term. So when you take a look at in the future, there are calculators that you can see where am I going to benefit from going from my 7, 6.5, 6 to 5.5, 5.25, 5, 4.5, whatever. You can really see how beneficial it is.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so as a realtor, a lot of times we deal with people who, they have these certain expectations about what their house is worth based on Zestimates or maybe Redfin or something like that. What are your thoughts on those numbers? And do you recommend kind of working with those companies or working with a realtor? What are your thoughts?
Definitely in today's world, technology is making it easier for just about anything that we buy, whether it be Amazon or seeing opinions on stuff. I mean, I always go straight to the comments on anything. It's entertainment. But I think that there are tools out there like Redfin or Zillow that makes it really easy for you to say, I'm looking for, now that you know I can afford X amount of dollars, just monitor what houses are out there for that. And they're not the only tools out there, but if you see a house on Zillow or Redfin or Realtor.com, Realtor's actually kind of picked up their game. It's a pretty nice site now. It was very lax back a few years ago. But anyways, if you see it and you call that listing agent, they've already signed a contract that says they're representing the sellers. So unless you really, really know what you're doing, and as a first-time home buyer, you don't, just because you watch things on HGTV or YouTube, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, whether it be, should we have an inspection, or should I ask for a title to be paid? How much can I negotiate? Things like that. You have to have your own real estate agent representing you to go back and forth with them.
Otherwise, you get taken advantage of probably.
Well, the listing agent's gonna fight for the lister, the seller.
Sure.
And you might not know what they're doing. When they tell you that's not what's going on in the market today. That's what I would say if I was a listing agent, even if, but it might not be true.
Right.
That's what their goal is. And if they get paid more, the higher the house sells. So why would they want to let you have a lower price? You need to have a buyer's agent that comes in and negotiates it better for you.
Awesome.
That's what I think. What do you think?
I'm a little biased, but yeah, I think it definitely work with a realtor. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong. And understand Zestimate is just what Zillow thinks. They've got an algorithm. Redfin has the same thing, what the value is of that house. You really need to have a real estate agent that says, that's crazy. Because look at these, a CMA, a comparative market analysis, right? Here's a CMA as to why I think we need to come in at a lower price. And so let's say you say, okay, Mr. Listing Agent, I'm going to buy that house for what you say it's worth. And then the appraisal comes in low, that's a problem.
Yeah.
There's ways around it, renegotiation, or you bring more money to the table, which is what we had to do a couple years ago. But if you had a buyer's agent, they could go in and ahead of time say, look, this is what I think, this is why we're making this offer, because of this, this, and this.
Yeah. I think a lot of where a real estate agent comes into play is less about the actual offer itself and more about navigating the waters kind of before and after, in the negotiating process that happens after the offer's been accepted. There's so many things that pop up during the inspection, the appraisal, like you said.
Yeah.
And
so like an inspection.
Yeah. I mean, that you can get back. I've seen some inspections. My wife and I still laugh about one that we got that was, I want to say it was 100 pages. I mean, just a huge, and to navigate that and to be able to negotiate on your behalf and actually fight for the important things and to discern, what is worth fighting for. Is this house worth what they say it's worth? Because the algorithm can only go so far. You still need that human touch, and you need someone advocating in your corner. It's important.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the vast majority of homes have inspections and there's issues, and there's always an inspection negotiation.
Yeah.
And a first-time home buyer trying to save 3% but it just doesn't work that way.
Amen.
You gotta do it 2 or 3 times before you can
Totally.
even consider doing it without an agent, in my opinion.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Step 1, get your credit score together. Step 2, get your DTI going. And step 3, get your down payment. Step 4, email David. What's your website again?
My email is dz@rate.com. That's easy. Mm-hmm. If you go to the dznumbers.com, it's easy to find me there. or you can go and you can monitor our rates. I post my rates every morning, or my system does every morning. Alwayscloseontime.com.
Alwayscloseontime.com. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and thank you to our sponsors, Scout Realty and Mission of Truth. And I will see you next time.